Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome on our show. Thank you for joining us. And now let me present our new guest, Gabriel Dusil, who is Vice President of Marketing and Strategy in a company called Visual Unity. And today he will tell us something about challenges of entertainment industry as such. So Gabo, floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Elena. What I wanted to talk about today and for the TVB viewers is what we're referring to in this presentation as the rise, fall, and rise again of the entertainment industry. And to put a little bit of context to that, we see that in the last 50 years of the entertainment industry, they've had a very nice, healthy success in entertainment and the delivery of broadcast content. But then something disruptive came along, and it was really basically the internet. So from that disruption came some successes and some failures, let's say, in how content was delivered to consumers. But to begin with, in a broadcast context, we often refer to multi-screen as multiple screens, and we don't really talk about multiple screens in this context from an over-the-top delivery of content. For us, multi-screen now refers to the delivery of content onto televisions, onto computers, onto smartphones, tablets, and in fact, one of the earliest screens that we're referring to is cinema. So these 5 screens are really now referred to in the OTT context as multi-screen. So when we talk about the internet, then we really need to move into connected devices. Of course, when the internet was first introduced, we didn't really have the bandwidth, we didn't have enough people on it, we didn't have the connectivity in order to really deliver entertainment to that medium. But as the bandwidth grew, we now moved into the middle of the last decade, and we had enough bandwidth to deliver video. If we look at the next 4 years, then these connected devices that are delivering video are now going to televisions, but we're also using Blu-ray connected televisions. We're using gaming consoles to deliver video, set-top boxes, of course, and media streamers. Now, from this research from Informa, it's clear that the connected television will represent about 50% of devices receiving online video by 2016. So when we're looking at how the internet has kind of been disruptive in this space, then we often refer to that disruption in the context of physical media. Okay? Physical media in terms of CD sales, in terms of DVD sales, and of course initially the VHS tape sales of movies, which around 2005 had started to decline. Now, we can blame that on the piracy, for example, that's happened across the internet. We could blame it on the internet itself in terms of how it's become disruptive to the entertainment industry. But we can also thank the internet for a lot of successes. But if we were to, let's say, fixate ourselves on now the dip or the fall of entertainment success, then this is often what we focus on. We focus on how this revenue decline can be blamed on the internet and therefore can be blamed on piracy.
Yeah.
So when we look at some of the studies, this one is from January 2011, so it's a little bit old, but it still provides some context in terms of how pirated content has been disruptive. Now, Envisional did this study that was trying to do an understanding of how much traffic is related to the delivery of video through pirated sites, and of course BitTorrent continues to be one of the highest technologies which is used for actually pirating that content. In a complete context, we're talking about 24-25% or a quarter of all internet traffic to be viewed as pirated, which is of course quite substantial for the entertainment industry. So we can blame a lot of the decline in physical media to the actual piracy community, for example. Now, in the context of BitTorrent, other studies talk about how a third of that traffic is movies, and the other types of content take up the remaining 2/3. But when we talk about movie content specifically, then it's safe to say that likely we're talking about a third of that content actually being in the video space. Now, getting a little bit more detailed in terms of what is driving the illegal download of content, or what is driving the legal purchase of content, then there are inhibitors, there are drivers. Okay, there are some inhibitors, people in terms of people not wanting to pirate content, for example, because of poor quality, inconsistency in terms of what you're actually getting. There's a lot of management of content, for example, in terms of the drivers. It's availability of content. There are some countries which have a lot of content, content being king, in their portfolios, but outside of the U.S. and outside of England and other countries, there isn't the accessibility of that content, which drives piracy in that context. Now, there also are legal drivers, why people are going down the legal route. The user interface, the user experience is becoming better, and people are finding that because of social media, because of recommendations from friends, using demographics in terms of behavior enhances the recommendations that you get in terms of buying content, then that is providing a good environment or kingdom in this case for users to stay and play and purchase a lot of content. So those are some of the drivers, but there are also some legal inhibitors as well. As we're talking about here, finding a balance of an attractive price. Okay, because we're looking at really a balance of understanding how consumers want to own content versus how consumers want to have just accessibility to that content. And we're seeing a sea change in how consumers are moving away from wanting to own a Blu-ray or own a CD or own a DVD, because of how easily accessible it is through very legitimate OTT service providers online. So we can use that as these inhibitors and these drivers to understand the behaviors of consumers. And we can use, of course, piracy to blame the decline of physical media. But what I want to talk about here is really looking at entertainment as a whole industry. And when we look at entertainment from an entire industry, this is a study from PwC and iDate, which really talk about the fact that in the last 10, 15 years, there has been a steady increase in revenue in the entire industry as a whole. So are we going to thank the internet for that? Are we going to, of course, we're certainly not going to be thanking piracy for an increase. It's easier for us to blame piracy, but some proponents say that the proliferation of that content on a global basis, whether it's through piracy or not, is a form of promotion. And of course, I'm not advocating whatsoever any copyright infringement, but you can argue both sides of the fence, actually. But now we're talking about the beginning of the presentation about the rise of the entertainment industry, about the fall of the entertainment industry, and in this context, referring to the fall really in terms of how the internet disrupted the buying behavior of users. So users are moving away from the ownership of content, they're moving towards accessing that content. And when you think of it from an individual's perspective, when a user has a Blu-ray disc and maybe watches that movie 2 times, 3 times, do we really need to have it on our shelves for the next 20 years? And I think users are starting to realize that maybe I don't need to have that disc anymore when I'm only going to be watching it 2 or 3 times. Of course, we're going to listen to music much more often, so it's slightly different for music, but the same context applies in that case. So what I want to do here is really look at a little bit more granular in terms of how the industry has thrived and succeeded in the entertainment industry. And this really talks about a U.S. Household spending, as has been, the spending of entertainment has been increasing through the years and through the recession as well. So on a per user basis, people are spending more money on their entertainment, and in some cases it's almost immune to recessions, generally speaking. When we look at cinema is kind of an interesting one, because cinema in the US in particular, as you can see from this study, is on a steady decline, okay, from a revenue perspective. Now, when we look at the ticket prices have been increasing, so that's kind of been offsetting revenue from US cinema. Now, if we take that from a revenue perspective, you can see the dark blue, in this case, fairly flat. So the increase in the cinema tickets has offset the decline in revenue on a US perspective. So it's almost had a flat revenue and it's slightly increasing. But what is significant here is how American cinema has and global cinema has been increasing in revenue much more substantially. So you have the Chinese market, which are exploding in terms of cinema. You have Japanese market, the UK market, the Indian market growing significantly fast, which on a global basis has a very nice growth path in terms of revenue for cinema as a whole. Okay, so I think it comes down to how we focus on these markets. We can focus on some declines because of disruptive technologies like the internet, or we can look at it from a big picture perspective. And when we do look at it from a big picture perspective, then we see a nice growth in that market. So when we look at cinema, this is kind of almost a summary slide, and this was from the actual Motion Picture Association of America, that's looking at cinema increasing at about 6% compounded annual growth rate, which is a nice healthy growth for the industry as a whole on a global basis. So let's move on to film production. So film production, of course, related to cinema, but now looking at actually how many films have been produced on a global basis. A slight dip in 2006, likely because of strikes and so on in the industry, but there has still been, on an overall basis, a steady increase in the number of films being produced. And that could be looked at as a reflection of, if more films are being produced, likely we're in a healthy industry, in a healthy growth industry from an entertainment perspective. If we look at it from the standpoint of music has had a sea change of disruption because of the internet, and we can basically say that physical media has had a steady decline. And you can see that from this study from the IFPI group, steady decline for the last 15 years. Okay, in terms of physical sales on a unit basis as well as on a revenue basis, CDs have been declining. But what's interesting from the same study is that the actual single sales have been on an increase, both from a revenue perspective and from a unit sale perspective. So what that's telling us is that people don't necessarily want to buy the whole album anymore to get a couple of songs. iTunes has enabled the ability, and other services like Rhapsody and Spotify have given us the ability to just allow us to access the songs that we want and nothing more. We don't have to have all 15 songs, but it's showing that consumers are just wanting the granular ability to buy what they want, and that's it. So that's been an interesting aspect of the music industry. And this study from the same group is talking about how the overall music industry has actually continued to grow. Okay, it's about a 5% growth rate year on year, with a little bit of a dip. But generally speaking, when we look at radio advertising, when we look at recorded music, when we look at licensing of that content, then from that overall perspective, there is a steady increase in that industry. The last one I want to talk about, and then you can ask me some questions, is in the gaming industry. Okay, so gaming also having issues with coming back to the piracy issue, and generally speaking, and as we can see from this study, there's a double-digit growth in gaming, regardless of the disruptions that the internet has created. In fact, actually, we can say that the internet has succeeded in fueling a successful growth in the overall gaming industry. You have excellent services from companies like Steam, for example, and others, which provide that online capability to download games.
Yeah.
So generally, what we're saying is that there is a continued growth in the industry across the board, whether it's gaming, whether it's cinema, whether it's music,
Yes.
whatever part of the entertainment industry, all of them are actually growing. What is clear is that physical media sales are in decline and are continuing to decline. And what we believe is that it's really a shift in how consumers are moving from ownership of content to accessing that content and having the granular ability to just get what they want.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where we're moving to in the over-the-top market space, where content providers are delivering what users want and giving them the granular option to only buy and consume what they want to consume.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Gabriel. From what I've understood very well is that it is not being anymore about the content holder, but about the device where the person is actually consuming the content from. So tell me, how has the rise in content consumption come about in the last 10 years in terms of devices? Because I'm sure that Visual Unity with a 22 years of experience can tell a lot to this question.
Well, definitely and what we talked about in the presentation is about multi-screen. Multi-screen has expanded the user's ability to consume content anytime, anywhere, and on any device.
Okay.
And that's really been another aspect to increasing the choice of users. So consumers want the ability to have a granular ability to choose what they want. If they're watching 5 channels on television, they don't want to buy 500. And a lot of studies show that consumers are wanting to purchase those 5 channels. And services like Netflix and Hulu and other OTT providers are showing the ability to have consumers buy just what they want through either subscription-based services or transaction-based service.
Yes.
And multi-screen helps that, because now we're moving away from the living room, we're moving away from just a lean back experience to consuming entertainment, to a lean forward experience on our laptops or our tablets or our mobiles.
Yes.
And we're having second screen experiences where we're watching some content on our television, and we're also in parallel checking out our tablets and our phones to look at some statistics from a sports perspective on the different players, or looking at some related complementary content to some television program that we're watching in terms of voting, for example,
Okay.
for reality
Yeah.
shows. So that has really been quite an important sea change in how consumers consume content.
Okay, thank you. From what I know about you, you have a very rich background in the internet security, and you were talking a lot about privacy issue and a lot about the copyrights and piracy. And I would like to ask if you think that DRM technologies, advanced DRM technologies, will rather enhance monetization of the content or will rather hinder it? Like, will there be more piracy or less thanks to these technologies today?
Yeah, we didn't touch too much on the DRM issue, and it's actually an important one, because we can separate how the music industry dealt with DRM and how the movie industry is dealing with it. An interesting aspect to, for example, iTunes is when iTunes first came out, it was with a strong DRM component.
Yes.
And then Apple decided to remove DRM and have free access to music. And even with that happening, the music industry continues to grow and continue to grow from that standpoint. In the movie industry, it's a little bit more sensitive, and DRM is still a strong component in terms of accessing and content. And you have solutions from Microsoft, Ready Play, and we have Ultraviolet, which is trying to have more portability from different devices and buying content from one source, but having the ability to watch that content on other multi-screens with the same DRM package. Now, we believe that there's still quite a lot of work to do in terms of ease of use and having a friendly DRM approach for subscribers. But we think that the developments of Ultraviolet, for example, are in the right direction of trying to address those concerns of portability, and there's also some future considerations that when 4K comes out, for example, will we be forcing users to buy that content again, or if they have the Blu-ray already, having them the ability just to pay an incremental fee to get the 4K version. We've had consumers having a VHS tape version of a movie, then having to buy the DVD copy of that movie, and if they wanted a Blu-ray, then they would have to again purchase the Blu-ray. Are we going to do that again for consumers for 4K? So these type of upgrade issues from a security perspective haven't yet been addressed from an overall industry perspective, but we think that DRM is moving in the right direction to look at these type of challenges.
Okay, so thank you very much, because you told us a lot about the past of the entertainment industry, the present. You were very well described the entire situation, but tell me, what is in your opinion main challenge? What are the main hurdles of entertainment industry for the future?
Okay.
What do you think?
So from that perspective, I think that the challenges kind of are separate from those countries that own a lot of content versus countries that don't own content. So countries like, for example, the US, the UK, India, that have a lot of ownership of that content, you have a lot of providers in those countries, generally speaking, that can't necessarily differentiate themselves from the content itself, because everybody has content. So we're seeing that the challenge for those Western markets, those developed markets, is to have a very exciting and a compelling user interface and user experience. Because the way we look at it is content is king. Content is king everywhere. And we look at the user interface and the user experience as the kingdom. So if you already have content, you want the users to stay within that kingdom, you want them to play in the kingdom, and the longer that they play and have fun within the kingdom, the more they'll be buying from you.
Sure.
In the developing markets, as we move away from the countries that own that content, in developing markets where they have to get licensing for that content and aggregate that content and have those licensing agreements in place, their frontier is focusing on getting agreements to distribute that content and not yet looking at the user interface and the user experience yet.
Okay, I see.
But if we look at the American market as looking into the future of what the emerging markets challenges are in the next 4 years, then we'll be talking about the user interface and the user experience in 4 years in the emerging markets.
Okay, thank you. It was wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and attention, and thank you, Gabriel, for bringing us all this information.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.